So here is a good example, or at least a decent example, of a sample graph for 3.2. You'll notice I've got my axes labeled, I've connected my dots, but I didn't bother going through every point, so it just shows the overall trend. I have a key, and I would have put a wonderful descriptive title on the top of my graph, but I didn't want to give away what your title should be. So sometimes titling the graph is the hardest part, so I want to see what you guys come up with tomorrow. So there are a couple notes that I want you to make on your graph. And here we have pretty typical results. So you have your water in blue, and it just kind of goes down. And then you'll notice your substance goes down and then levels off for a bit, and then goes down again. I'd expect everyone to have this kind of result, or at least this kind of shape. Now, this level part might be smaller for some groups and larger for other groups, okay? I'd like you to label the level part of your graph. We call it the plateau, okay? And that's a section of the graph where the temperature stays constant. And so that's why it's pretty flat. So find the plateau on your graph and label it with this definition. Okay. The next thing I'd like you to do is figure out about what the temperature is at the plateau for your graph. You might need to look back at the data itself to figure this out. So I only went up by ones over here, so it's pretty easy for me to see that my plateau is at about 83 degrees. So I'm going to say that my plateau is at 83 degrees Celsius. If your plateau isn't as flat or isn't as long, you may want to look back at your data table and find a chunk of time when the temperature stayed relatively constant and figure out kind of what the temperature was at the middle of that. So the first thing you've done is found your plateau and labeled it. The second thing is figured out what the temperature was at the plateau. Okay? There are two other things that I want you to do with your graph. Okay? The first thing I want you to do is, if you made notes in your data, I want you to label where on this curve you saw your first solid, where it was slushy or half and half, and where it was totally solid. Okay? And I'm not going to put the points on here because I don't want to give away the answer for where it should be. So look back at your data, see at what time was your first crystal, go up to that time, and then let's say it was here, I'd label first crystal. Where was it slushy? Where was it totally solid? If you didn't write down all three observations, put on here whichever observations you had. Okay? So at this point, you also should have a label on this line of where you saw your first crystals, where it was half and half, solid and liquid, and then where it was totally solidified. Okay? The last thing I want you to do is I want you to think about this question. Why does the substance have a plateau and the water doesn't? Okay? I want you to think about it, try and figure out why, and then answer this question wherever you have room. So it could be in a little empty space of your graph like this. It could be down here. It could be on the previous page. It could be on the next page if you need it to be.
Borgo, please come to the main office.
Hang on. Okay, so right now you should have 5 things on your graph. 6. definition of plateau, your plateau labeled, the temperature at your plateau, the time where you saw your first crystals, the time where it was half and half liquid and solid, and the time where it was totally solid, and your hypothesis for why the substance has a plateau but the water doesn't. All right, see you tomorrow.